Before we get started in Dharma talk, please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good afternoon, dear Sangha. We are continuing on the Dhammapada. We are 6 verses, well, after today, 5 verses away from completing the 5th chapter, titled Balavaga, or the Fool. Today we'll be covering verse 70. And as usual, I'll give the verse, give the story behind the verse, and my commentary. The story, or I'll read the verse first. So verse 70 of chapter 5 goes, "Month after month a fool may eat only as much food as can be picked up on the tip of a kusa grass blade. But he is not worth a 16th part of those who have comprehended the truth." Again, month after month, a fool may eat only as much food as can be picked up on the tip of a kusa grass blade. But he is not worth a 16th part of those who have comprehended the truth. The story behind this verse is another famous Buddhist story. The story may be longer than my commentary, but so shall it be. But the story is about a man named Jambuka. Actually, let me talk about Jambuka's past life first, make more sense. So, in the time of Kassapa Buddha, Jambuka was a monk and a resident monk at some monastery, and there was an arahat, a fully enlightened monk who had visited the monastery at the time. And so the monk at the time, Jambuka, who wasn't Jambuka yet, but pre-Jambuka, of course, at first saw the arahat come in, and of course, any enlightened being that's in your vicinity is a kind of a quite obvious sign. So he knew that this was a highly enlightened being. So of course he welcomed him and offered him a place, the monastery, to sit, to eat, and to rest. And he was, waited on and revered at the time. Then the next morning, when the monk and the arahat had went into the village for alms, because even the villagers had knew that this was the consensus that this was a highly enlightened being, this is an arahat. So they, of course, gave a little bit more attention to him and gave him some very choice foods and some new cloth to make new robes, and all these different requisites and offerings. And so the resident monk felt some slight jealousy from that, right? At first he was like, all right, this is fine, this is cool. But then as it started to happen more and more often, he got a little bit more disturbed in the mind, thinking that the villagers who had looked after him for all these years are now favoring this other monk. And he was fearful that he would kind of take over his spot in the monastery. The point is that he got pretty jealous, right? And so one day, or not one day, but at one point, actually don't remember if it was before or after this incident. It doesn't matter in what order this happened, but I'm gonna say it anyway. So there was at one point where the monk had gotten so jealous that he kind of just had an outburst with this arhat and started to call him out and said that he wasn't worthy of these offerings, that he should just, that he wasn't worthy of these offerings that he was being given. He wasn't worthy of the requisites that he was given, like new bedding and medicine and cloth for new robes and mats for sitting, and etc. And basically called him out and said, it's more worthy that you just eat excrement and die, essentially. And so the next morning, after he had called the monk out, or called the arhat out, the arhat, knowing being an arhat, right, he knew the causes and conditions of people, and so he knew that if he had stayed at the monastery, that he would cause more suffering for this monk than if he were to leave. So that night he had left the monastery secretly. He didn't tell the other monk that he was leaving. He just up and left. So the next morning after he had left, the resident monk, kind of fearing the consequences of his actions, right? Because he called this monk out, called him all these names, and basically insulted the guy. Woke up early that morning, did his morning chores, and then traditionally when monks go out for alms, they ring the bell, the monastery bell, to get everyone gathered, right? And so the monk, instead of ringing the actual bell, he just went next to the bell and with the tip of his fingers did. He's like, all right, I rang the bell. I did my duty. He just sat there and just kind of waited. I'm like, all right, you didn't show up. So he went into the village and did his alms. And then when he got to the houses that kind of favored, but gave better food to this arhat, they asked, where's the great bhikshu? And so this monk, who's like, well, I don't know, you gave him some really good bedding, some really good food. He's probably just slumped out and just being lazy. He didn't listen to he didn't hear me cleaning the monastery this morning. He didn't hear the bell that I rang, so I don't know where he is. And so they gave him a bowl of offerings, like, all right, here's some food, go back and give it to the Venerable. So on the way back to the monastery, knowing that the food that he had was much better food than he ever got, right? Again, this feelings of jealousy and anger arose, and instead of taking it back to the monastery, he just dumped it, he threw it. And so with the actions of him calling out this enlightened being, early on, and then the actions of him throwing out his offerings caused some severe karmic damage, right? And so it is said that when he died, he went to hell and was suffering for who knows how long until he was finally reborn again as Jambuka. And it was said that and this is kind of where the actual story starts, right? All this is background story. So this is kind of where the story starts. Is that he was born into a rich family, a rich Brahmin family. And it is said that the moment that he was born, he would never eat anything that was offered to him. He would never, like the family, his parents would try to feed him, he wouldn't eat. So the only thing he would eat was his own excrement. I just realized we've been going through a lot of weird stories in the last couple sessions and classes. if you've been joining us for that. But anyway, so he would only eat his own excrement. And eventually the parents had sent him off to live with the ascetics, with naked ascetics, and said, you know what, this is no child of mine eating his own excrement. He's going to go and hopefully the ascetics will fix him right up, right? Remind you of anything till this day? Anyway, so they did that. And he lived with the ascetics for a while, but eventually even the ascetics found out, right? And they found out because even the ascetics would go out for alms as well. And so every time they would go out for alms in the morning, this Jambuka would say, you go ahead, I'll stay back and I'll eat later. So after some time, the ascetics were wondering, like, where is he getting his food from? And so after they kind of went off, they snuck around and just kind of spied on Jambuka to see where he was getting his food from. And they found out he was going to the outhouses, into the latrines, and doing what you think he's doing. And so they too were disgusted. They're like, yeah, you're not staying with us either, freaking weirdo, and kicked him out. So now he's on his own. But this, of course, didn't stop him, right? This is a core defilement of his. And so he then started to take on this persona of this ascetic, this type of guru, where he would still hang around the latrines and the outhouses. But then the way that he would kind of not guard, what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out here. Close, we're almost there. Geez Louise. The way, what he would do to kind of protect or oh goodness, you're fighting back with somebody. What's that called? Like if someone's yelling at you and you're yelling back. Defend, sorry, defend. Thank you. Jeez Louise. The way that he would defend why he was hanging around the outhouses is the story that he would say that he was this highly enlightened, highly realized guru, that he would stand on one leg and lean against a latrine or some rock or some tree with his mouth open, right, toward the wind. And people would be like, oh, who are you? And he's like, I'm a wind eater. He doesn't eat food. He relies on wind to sustain him. But he used that excuse to be able to hang around where he was hanging around. That way when people left and for the day or whatever, then he would just go around back and take his fill of people's fills. And so after some years, he had kind of started to build this reputation. Like, oh, people kind of came and saw him out. I'm like, oh, there's this guru who just stands on one leg with his mouth open and just eats wind the whole time, right? And so every once in a while, people would come and try to offer him food, right? Until this day, it's a very holy practice to offer offerings to holy people, right? The act of offering allows the offerer to obtain a lot of good karma, good merit, right? And so he would, of course, deny them because he's not going to eat food, right? He's never eaten food. But eventually, because they kept on pushing, he was like, all right. So he pulled one casa grass and used the tip of it to dip it into the food and take a lick. He was like, all right, that's enough to get your merit, right? It's just the act of accepting the offering that creates the merit. Because if he were to deny them outright, then they would get no merit out of it, right? So it's not like you have to eat the whole thing as long as you accept it, right? And that's why sometimes you'll see in temples when people offer monks and nuns things, they just accept it and put it to the side, right? They don't use it, they don't hold on to it, because that's not the necessary part. That's not the important part. That's beside the point. And so he'd do that, right? That's where the Kasa grass verse comes from. So eventually, as the Buddha does, he would, in the mornings after he would wake up, he would kind of use his Buddha mind to survey, the world, to see who is out there that is near or close enough on the verge of enlightenment, right? That way he would seek them out and help them so they can quickly attain enlightenment for those that are capable of becoming enlightened in that lifetime. So it's said that Jambuka in past lives, when he was a monk, though he wasn't a very good monk, clearly, right? He said some terrible things to an arhat, right? One of the worst things you can do. But he did have meditation practice. He had a solid meditation practice, though he didn't really achieve anything from the meditation necessarily, right? As far as high realizations, he had some practice. So even though it didn't help him in that lifetime, it will eventually. And so fast forward to the lifetime that he has now, and the Buddha, using his Buddha mind, saw him out. And so one day that same day when the Buddha figured out, all right, Jambuka is going to be my next arhat. And so he went out and looked for Jambuka and found them leaning against this tree with one leg up and mouth open. And he asked Jambuka if he knew of a place that he could reside for the night. And so he kind of directed him to some mountain cave where Jambuka was also residing. And so he went there, and that night, the devas came down and wanted to offer the Buddha, revere the Buddha and offer offerings and whatnot. And so it kind of showed, the place kind of lit up and shone because of these devas that appeared. And so the next morning, or that night, because Jambuka saw the light, the next morning he went to the Buddha and asked, I had witnessed this light, it was kind of this radiance coming from the cave. What was that? And the Buddha told him that these were devas coming to make obeisance to the Buddha. And Jambuka said, after 55 years of austerities, even I don't have the qualifications, or I don't have the ability to have devas come and, revere me. And so it must be nice to be a Buddha and have that. Or something along those lines. No, that's not important. But what is important is when Jambuka had, I guess in this sense, confessed in a way, or told him that he's been practicing extreme austerities, that he hadn't attained anything. Well, the Buddha was like, well, obviously. He was like, Jambuka, you can fool the people, but you cannot fool me. Right? And so Jambuka kind of hesitated and was like, all right, what's this guy talking about? And so Buddha then had told him and reiterated the story of his past life, of what he had done to the arhat, and that was the reason, amongst other evil deeds that he's done in the past. Those were the accumulation, and the result is now you lived in this life eating excrement and pretending to be this highly realized guru when you're not. And so after that Dharma talk, he had attained arhatship right then and there, in that moment. And he had vowed or asked the Buddha to ordain or to allow him to enter the monastery as one of his disciples. And he had done so. And so that's the very weird story of this verse. And so I'll read the verse again, because now that I will explain the verse, maybe it'll make a little bit more sense to you. Or the story would make a little bit more sense. Sorry, this verse would make a little bit more sense. Again, the verse goes, month after month, a fool may eat only as much food as can be picked up on the tip of a kusa grass blade. He is not worth a 16th part of those who have comprehended the truth. This verse is mostly about austerity, austeric practices, right? And so the kind of verbiage of kusa grass is, when speaking of it in a kind of spiritual sense or a dharmic sense, it's generally referring to austeric practices, right? About punishing oneself, eating little, right? Only on the tip of the kusa grass. It's kind of like the stock image of what of self-punishment is eating off of the tip of a kusa grass. And that he is not worthy of a 16th part of those who have comprehended the way. I know it sounds like it's very specific of a measurement, but 16th part is also mentioned quite often in sutras, but it's also referring to, quote unquote, just not enough. Basically, that's what it's referring to. It's just not enough. And it's not enough for those who have comprehended the truth. And so even the Buddha himself had gone through austeric practices before he had attained Buddhahood, right? For 6 years he had practiced austerities to the point of near death, right, according to the stories. And so that severe self-punishment, that severe denying oneself kind of the normal tendencies of the body wasn't doing much for him. On the other hand of that, being a prince and having everything he ever wanted, right? Complete indulgence in pleasures and desires also didn't do anything for him either. And so the verse is also kind of a reminder of the Buddha's middle way, madhyamaka, that the extreme austeric practices isn't going to do you any good, and the extreme self-indulgence of pleasures and desires are also not going to do any good. Right? So the correct path is the middle path in between, where you get just enough of each side to sustain, to live, to accept, to understand. And so the Dharma talk that the Buddha had provided, Jambuka at the time, was also telling him of the harsh reality of wrong austeric practices, right? Because those are clearly still things that happen today. If you go to India, you'll still see naked ascetics everywhere. You'll see different types of ascetics here and there in different regions, different, even if you go to other places, even in China they have them, Vietnam they have them, right? It's still a very common practice. But there's right practices, right ways of practicing, and there's wrong ways of practicing. Clearly, standing on one leg and trying to eat air to sustain yourself isn't going to do you anything, right? There's no benefit to that, right? So that's not a valid practice. But even in Buddhism, there still lies some austeric practices, like eating one meal a day. That's still a very common practice that is done. But or not laying down is another one. Right? There's a lot of monks and nuns, highly realized monks and nuns that never lay down. They sleep sitting up. All they do is sit and walk, sit and walk, sit and walk. So some of those things kind of still carry on. But when you start to practice some of the more extreme practices that have no benefit, then that's just a waste of time. Right? Tell me what benefit is there to stand on one leg all day and to eat air, right? If you're a wind eater, what benefit is that doing to you? So the Buddha was kind of being harsh about him. Was like, outwardly, you're pretending to have this purity, but inwardly, in heart and mind, you're nothing. There's no change. right? And so it kind of reminds us to not really judge, especially in a religious sense, not to judge religious people by their appearance, especially clergy or monastics, right? An outward appearance means nothing. Anyone can pretend to be somebody, right? Sometimes you'll go to churches or synagogues or mosques or temples, and you'll see these clergy who are quite religious and quite professional, and they look the part, they sound the part. Behind closed doors, they're doing everything the exact opposite of what they preach. Even in Buddhism, I'm not discounting Buddhism either, right? Just recently, unfortunately, even in Thailand, there was a recent case where some small temple had the monastics, I think there was only a total maybe 27, I think, but like some dozen of them were caught or were tested positive for drugs. Right? That's one of the precepts that we take, is to not take intoxicants. But they were found with drugs, they were found with even some weaponry in the monastery, and so they were kicked out, they were defrocked. Right? They were unworthy of the robe, basically. And so just because someone looks religious and someone looks attained doesn't mean anything, right? Even if someone is soft-spoken, right, as a monastic, if one seems to have the knowledge necessary to teach the Dharma or whatnot, doesn't mean anything, right? And so the Buddha is stating that what you see on the outside, if it doesn't match the purity of the mind, then it's kind of distracting me. If the outward appearance doesn't match the inward appearance, then it basically cancels each other's out, right? You can have a positive externality with a negative internality, right? So other than emphasizing or discrediting bad ascetic practices, the Buddha is reminding us of the middle way, to think, not to think, but to practice what you actually want to achieve. Not just to practice, right? Ask Quang Hian, as an Anagataka who lives at the temple now, right? He's not technically a monk yet. But if you ask him, what are you doing here? Let's see what he answers. Is he though? For those that don't see him every day, like, oh yeah, he sometimes he'll come and he's outside doing some chore work, or he's doing this or that. Like, oh, he looks very studious. But is he though? Or is that just what he wants you to see? Is he just here to be here? Are you here just to be here?
I know him, I wouldn't say he's here to stay.
Pretend you don't. You don't.
Your point is on the surface.
Right. On the surface, you can put on whatever mask you want. Right? This is my own bias, I suppose. This has nothing to do with anything of Dharma necessarily. But I don't want to use the word judge, because I don't judge, I critique. But when you see, because we typically visit like a lot of temples every once in a while, and you meet with the monastics, you meet with the people who are living at the monastery, who are teaching the Dharma, and a lot of times, depending on the tradition and depending on who the monastics are, there are times where these monastics have no true education, whether secular education or Buddhist education, right? There are a lot of countries, especially the poorer countries, where people ordain just to get out of bad situations, to get out of poverty, right? Because if you come from a poor, back in the day, if you were from a poor family who couldn't be supported, right? The family couldn't make enough money to feed you, didn't have enough place to put you, so they would send their kids to the monastery to ordain, become monks and nuns, because at least they were guaranteed shelter and food and sustenance, right? And so you have ordained people who are just there to be there, and they have no intention to truly attain anything, to truly practice anything. They're just there for free food and housing. And so for the most part, till this day, that's still a common practice. Even in other religions, not just Buddhism, in a lot of religions that have clergy work, right, who allow you to get yourself out of like normal everyday life into something that's more, guaranteed. It's an easy escape, right? You can fake it till you make it, honestly. But when you're faking it to make it like that, right, there's no true benefit. In most cases, you're doing more damage for yourself and to others than any helpfulness at all. Because if you just read a few books, right, like if Quang is just reading a few books and he's spewing out knowledge, right, information, that's just being read off of a book. Is that true wisdom? Is that a kind of teacher you want? Because you can do the same thing yourself. Why come and rely and revere someone who's just reading off of a book? You can go home and do the exact same thing. You can revere yourself. And so as you start to practice and you come in contact with these type of people, it's much easier to see that for yourself. It's easier to kind of have that sense of if what they know is true, of what they claim is true, their attainments are true, or the realizations are true. Because these false practices, this reliant on false practices, like ascetic practices, is even one of the 10 fetters. The 10 fetters that, when eradicated, allow you to become fully enlightened. And so the reliance on rites and rituals is the third fetter. Meaning that if all you're doing is relying on the ritual, on the ceremony, on this rite or whatever you're doing as the final cause to enlightenment, then you're no more worthy than naked ascetics. Meaning that if you believe that coming and bowing and doing these rituals that we do and chanting is the only way to enlightenment, get out of here. But the other part of on the other side of that is also true. If you think of just severe meditation practice and just sitting there and forcing your mind to quiet, that's just as bad. That's just one extreme, and that's one extreme. So then come the middle way, Madhyamaka. You have to have a little bit of both. You have to have a little bit of practice, have a little bit of study. That way you can practice what you study. And then you can preach of what you practice. I've said it before, I have a very specific rule. So when I teach, I'm not going to teach you something I just read yesterday. I will only teach anything, like I'm going to skip a lot of stuff that I haven't realized. I'm only going to teach you something that I've fully understood and come in truth with. Which is also why I don't teach on a lot of topics. There's a whole bunch of core Buddhist topics that should be taught. I'm not going to teach you. I haven't realized it. What would be the point? Because if all I'm going to do is just read off of a book, you can do the same thing. Okay, like 4 minutes. But you get the point, yes? Is to guard what you do. Guard your intentions. Sorry, that's what I meant. Guard your intentions. Just being here is already a good first step for you, right? The next step is, well, what are you going to do next? Or I should ask, why are you in here? You know what? I'm going to ask that. Why are you here? Ma'am, why are you here? Sorry, I'm going to call everyone out. It's not just you. Let her go first.
I have been learning into about all the concepts and the story.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I found books in that many years, and I read it. And I like what they teach, having that is ideal. And I saw a meetup, I thought, wow, I never have been able to and I could see it in person and interesting what you were talking about. That was something I was discussing with a friend just a couple of days ago about device.
Thank you. Let's go next.
Well, I practiced a lot of the Buddhist principles that I've learned from a sort of heal my mind and live a more healthy, peaceful life. And just like her, I saw this online, so I thought, why not just wanted to see how it was in real life. I just wanted to learn and to understand the other things than what I know in my life.
Sir. Where is peace? Where is peace? To give you a general answer, peace is where no peace exists. If there's no peace, then there's peace. If there is peace, then there's no peace. So then where is peace? If in a peaceful place there is no peace, but in a not a peaceful place there is peace, then what is peace? Stephanie? Okay.
I just sometimes stimulate my brain and I can figure out like how the things work. And a lot of things like I learn every day. And even though like I'm just brainstorming a lot of things at the same time, and I'm gonna ask the questions back. This kind of I get the answer from it. So always two sides of the thing, two sides of the coin, always fighting each other, trying to balance them.
Christopher, my youngest student.
Well, ever since I started coming here, it's told me a lot. So it's cool.
helped you in what way?
Maybe a more diligent person, maybe pay more attention to how I was thinking.
Leon.
I'm here to understand better how my mind works, because the biggest realization was that I am not mine, I'm not the thoughts, and yet the thoughts are there, and my true self is here. So trying to, in the present, we're not in the present. There's no peace, there's no war, there's no anything, just the stillness. So it's learning how to navigate this world and all the extremes and pain and beauty, it's all there. What does that all mean? So I think I'd say to lose the condition is a big one. To realize how conditioned our minds are, how stuck they are in thought and belief. And if we can just step back for a second and see that, it's like, oh my, then it gives us, hopefully gives us something to work with. Right?
Quang.
A lot of it is to answer the question of what is the honest shape of man? What is man when you take everything away?
Try again.
It kind of goes into what Leon was talking about. When you take away all the conditioning, what's left?
What is left? Which is a state of, let me rephrase that, which is a state of what?
Sorry?
Which is a state of what? And peace. The reason you have no peace is because the conditions of your life, the defilements of your life, the things you believe that brings you happiness in life are causing you to suffer. More specifically, the attachments that we have to these conditions is what causes suffering. We hear a lot, I don't know about you, but you may hear or read a lot that how pleasures in life or the desires that we have in life is something that should be oppressed and pushed away. But that's stupid. It's folly. Because it's not that you should not have pleasures. It's not that you shouldn't have desires. Because these are perfectly normal human things to have. The problem that comes is our attachment to those pleasures that we have, right? Because everything is, you're conditioned to feel either like or dislike of everything that you have in life, you have sense of, right? According to anything that touches your senses, right? Because you have eyes, that means you can see. So when the moment you see this cat, for instance, what happens next, right? You have eyeballs, it goes to the cat, and comes back as what? As a contact. And then when it contacts the mind, then what happens?
Mind takes over.
Mind takes over, right? You start to cognite, you have perception of this. And your perceptions turns into those pleasures of, oh, cat. Right? That's why you're holding it. And so in that time frame of between contact and perception, right? Cognizing what's happening. That is the moment where pleasure is created, or displeasure is created, or hatred, or anxiety, or whatever it may be. But it's also at that point where we can stop it, we can observe it, we can witness it, and say, this is what is happening. And if I do this, this will happen. If I don't do this, this will happen. And now you have the complete power to control whether you have suffering or you have happiness. Because now this cat is sitting peacefully. If I were to go and grab it aggressively, what's going to happen? It's going to claw you, right? Is that pleasure? Unless you're weird, then no. It's painful. So where did that pleasure come from? Where did that happiness that you have in this cat sitting on you go? If something that brought you pleasure then can turn instantly into suffering, was it really happiness in the first place?
It's impermanent.
It's impermanent.
It will cease to exist.
Right. But that's where our fault comes from. That's where our fault comes as human beings, is we don't see the big picture. We don't see beyond the instant pleasure we get from things. Because if you can think beyond the instant pleasure you get of things and accept that this is not everlasting, right? That it's impermanent, that there's no true sense of happiness within this thing or person or place or whatever, and see it for what it truly is, then you'll have no room to attach to it. You'll know that it's pointless. And if you know it's pointless, then you can stop the suffering from ever occurring. And you'll have no reason to ever suffer ever again. You'll have no reason to go after things that you believe will bring you pleasure, to bring you pain or happiness or satisfaction. You can see and accept things for just as they are, for what they are. Whether good or bad, beautiful, ugly, right and wrong, none of these will matter. Because these are concepts that mankind had made. Said, this is beautiful, this is ugly, this is right, this is wrong, this is black, this is white. None of this is true. Because what's beautiful to me is ugly to you. What's beautiful to you is ugly to me. Then who's right? Who's wrong? If there are options, then it's invalid.
Yeah, light and darkness, there's more illumination here. It's not better or worse or different. It's just
right. If there's darkness and there's light, right? If the concept of light did not exist, then what is darkness?
There's no meaning.
Right. If things are beautiful and ugly, and you take away the ugliness, then what's left? Not beauty. Because beauty means then there has to be something ugly to go with it. But if ugliness, the concept of something ugly, doesn't exist.
It just is.
It just is. So then why call it something?
Because we're taught from time to judge. If we're better, not the worse.
Exactly.
Bigger, not the smaller. So
part of our practice is to distinguish those distinctions, right? And to see how our mind has been corrupted to believe in certain things, to believe to believe that a higher job means a happier life, that a bigger house means a happier life, that a fancier car means a happier life. Right? These are things that we're taught since we're a kid. Get a good education, get a good job, get a big family, have all this success, and you'll be happy. And yet, how many people are happy? We have one of the highest percentages of divorce in the world. Is that happiness? If you're getting a new car, getting a bigger house, getting a different job, then is that happiness? Temporarily. Temporary happiness isn't going to get you enlightenment. Yes, ma'am.
And I wonder if there's such a distinction between objective and subjective. If there is, what kind of distinction is? For example, a body needs food. I would say that's objective.
Mm-hmm.
And how you think about something that is not tangible, maybe subjective. Is that something that you have an opinion of it, or is something to distinguish that? Because you said it is. And then there are things that require more of an action because they're objective and other not. And I just wonder if that is something
Mm-hmm.
to think about or not. I allergic to the cat.
And this is why the cat stays outside. If we go back to the story of Jambuka, right, when the Buddha was rebuking his basically his self-mortification practices, saying that I don't eat air. He was like, well, you're dumb, because the body requires food, right? The body needs food. We know this. But the body does not need excessive food. The body doesn't need the fanciest food. The body doesn't need a $200 steak, right? Or a $50 salad. It doesn't need this. These are just nice to haves, right? So objectively, you need food. Subjectively, you don't need a $200 steak. What you do need is just something that will nourish your body to survive. You have to feed yourself, right? But then when you have the thought of hunger, I am hungry, then we already know I'm following what my body needs, right? That's it. That's all you need. But then if you go more into it and figure out, you start to pick and choose what you want. You want to go to, you want to indulge yourself in a fancy restaurant tonight, or you want to go and cook something that's going to cost you $300. That's right. That's where what's what I'm looking for. That's where the unnecessary part comes in.
Pay attention to what is necessary and then control the I am hungry, but there's nothing nutritious enough to eat.
Right. Right. You just need food, right? You don't have to have a $200 steak. A $200 steak is just good to have, right? It's nice, it's fancy, whatever. And, to maybe spoil yourself once a year for your birthday or something. I don't care. But it's not something you need every single day, right? It's a waste of money. Point.
Between eating and between just eating and then having a desire for the pleasure of eating, right? So if you're eating just for your sustenance, you enjoy it, your body tells you that's enough, and then you're done. But then the desire for pleasure from the food, that's what makes you get the second helping and all the state instead of the second or whatever.
Mm-hmm. It's that desire that we need to watch out for. Because if you sit there and you're like, okay, I need to eat, right? That's fine. It's a healthy desire because your body needs sustenance. But then if you have the thought of, oh, now I want to go to it's a steakhouse. Longhorn. I don't know. I don't go to restaurants anymore. But Ruth Chris, there we go. That's a fancy one, right? Think of like, oh, I want Ruth Chris. But then you're like, all right, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna get ready, I'm gonna dress up, I'm gonna put my hair up, my face on, I'm gonna put my best dress on, these fancy clothes, all this stuff. And you go to the restaurant and they're closed because they close on Sundays. I'm sure they don't, but just assume they do. Now, your expectations, desire to have a Ruth Chris went from happiness and excitement and ready for the pleasure and spend all this money, and you get to the place and it's closed.
Totally disappointed.
Totally disappointed. Right? Maybe even you become angry, like, how dare they close on a Sunday? Like, what is this, Chick-fil-A? You know what I mean? So that's where the damage comes.
So do we eat to live or do we live to eat?
Oh, that's a great question. Right? Do you eat to live or do you live to eat? Eat to live. But we also do live to eat. Because you have to. So instead of saying, do you live to eat or to live, but you should call it, do I live to eat the fanciest foods? Or do I eat the fanciest foods to live? Because now you're asking yourself, do I need the fancy food to live? Or am I living just to have the fancy foods? Because at this point now, both statements are incorrect. You don't live to have anything. You are unworthy to have anything. We are all unworthy to have anything in life. We do not live to have a fancy car, have a big house, have a great job, big family. This is not what we live for. For some it is, right? It's not necessary. So then, oh man, I'm so over time. Okay, one more point. The idea that we live in order to get something out of it limits you so much to what life actually is or should be. Right? Think of your life. We're all old enough to have experiences in the life of people telling us, this is what you should do. Right? Especially parents. Parents are probably the biggest supporters of go get a high education, go get several degrees, get this kind of job, get this much money, have this many kids, right? Even my own parents, knowing that I'm a monastic, I'm celibate, I will never bear children, still ask for grandkids. I'm like, you're so delusional. I call my mother all the time. I'm like, you're delusional. Why do you keep bringing it up? But that's the type of suffering we all go through, is wanting these types of expectations and think if you would just go after it long enough, then eventually you'll get it. Okay, let's stop talking. I know I used the time to ask you a question instead of the other way around, but I will give 2 minutes. Someone actually has a good question.
How this asana? There's a lot of thing you're talking about, like, means we don't judge, but like, in order to get the surgery, means that even your surgeon, you need somebody else to perform surgery on you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, same thing like you go to school, you teach a but like say some people fake maybe, but they are not really practicing their knowledge or sharing their knowledge. So for the starters, anyway, get that knowledge instead of like giving you that knowledge on other places. Say go and then yourself. It's okay to get the knowledge without judging whether or not the person has studied, especially the study for that previous life of that Dhammapada. He was there, right? He was well educated and everything, but he was published, right? So he even like to go to the very educated, but he was jealous and everything. And so how do we don't have to judge somebody, especially with teaching, whether he well educated or not. Especially like they were telling me, I mean, I listen to him. He teaches really good. He's still practicing, but he has a good lot of knowledge. He doesn't have to, we don't have to judge it. It's whether or not we have attained the
we know that there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? Because knowledge is something that's learned. You go to school, you have a job, you learn through these experiences. This is knowledge. Wisdom is something that is realized, that is attained through practice. So if he doesn't practice what he teaches, then he's just full of knowledge, right? Doesn't mean that the knowledge is invalid. Knowledge is good, right? It may help other people come to their own realizations, right? But we're not judging. I don't care how much he knows. I don't care how much he's attained. That's not my problem, right? It doesn't benefit me, it doesn't do me any good, doesn't do me any bad. It doesn't matter. He can stay here for the rest of his life. If he's attained anything, great. If he hasn't, also great. It has nothing to do with me. We're not here to judge. We're here to help, right? But within even with his lack of attainments, he still sits and teaches the sutra class, right? I'm allowing him to do so because I know he has enough will, enough experience, enough knowledge to be able to articulately put it into words that will be helpful for people. If not, I want to let him sit anywhere. I'll let him sit in the back, Ivan, not even in the front. Right?
I think point I was making like not in terms of teacher, but in terms of person who is getting that knowledge from the person, wherever it comes from, it's useful to the person who is receiving it.
Right.
So I'm speaking for the people who are learning, whether or not the preacher is preaching, has not practiced or not, it's immaterial. Same as surgeon. Whether or not like that surgeon, I don't know, I don't judge it. Whether he has studied so much or he's still doing sloppy surgery.
Well, I don't know about you, I don't want to slap you surgeon.
We just check and everything. He's very good, like but a lot of times you see the surgeon is like, he was like that Mata. You were jealous. You were jealous to the junior surgeon or whatever, like you doing sloppy surgery. And other hand, like some junior surgeon, he could have done really good job because he was so attentive and did really good. But he has just started practicing. He has not attained that wisdom, but he's already there. And like a lot of examples, we get that some people get attain the awakeness in the same life or very instant to God because they are dedicated.
So the question is more about the hearer versus the speaker. Well, that's based on individuality mostly, right? Because if I am teaching something that I have not attained or realized, but it helps you attain something or realize something, it's still a good teaching, yes? Right? And so it's not, I'm not saying that you should never teach something that you haven't attained or realized or something that you're good at, because it could be of benefit to others, right?
They could have just read it like the same effect.
Correct. You can, right? You can even like when Quang is teaching the Dharma class, the Sutra study class, he too is literally reading from a book, right? All his notes come from a book. But the difference is that he's saying in a different way that if you don't understand it from reading the book, maybe you'll understand it from the way that he paraphrased it.
Which shows that you truly understand.
He's dedicated.
Right.
That's what, like, the only way you are going to hear when and they understand, and somebody who is very, very sincere about that. So when it shows you sincerity.
True. Okay, I'm going to stop. We're so over time. Please join me in invoking Buddha's name 3 times and transcend the merit. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merits of all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dharma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilled. As all Buddhas now show their perfect body, homage to the incense cloud canopy, Bodhisattva and great Bodhisattvas. Gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting careful efforts, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forget and realize our true home. Pledge to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dharma and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empties, and 3 periods of time. To the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom, Bodhisattva, universal great conduct, Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva, Bodhisattvas and the glorious Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. To Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, earth sword, great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea like Bodhisattva. Unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Pilgrim, briefly in this world I am grateful and joyful to hear the Lotus Sutra. How hard to be born a human again, but I might hope to hear once more the Lotus Sutra. The Buddha moon is hidden, the son of Maitreya Nayata risen in the long night's darkness. In between only the Lotus Sutra sheds its light. The wonderful Dharma of the Lotus Sutra, whoever copies it, reads it, lives it, they say will be called preacher of the fivefold Dharma, with his 6 truths cleansed in the end. He who chants the Lotus Sutra is guarded by a heavenly host. He wanders the world without like a lion king. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Namo Sadharma Pundarika Sutra. Go to page 6. This assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo Lotus assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Sutra of the Lotus of the One to an end. He had no more earthly desires, who had attained what was to their advantage, and had put an end to the bonds of existence, and whose minds had achieved a state freedom. At the time the Buddha sat in lotus position and entered samadhi, his body and mind never moving. The heavens rained mandarava flowers, gray mandarava flowers, manjushaka flowers, and gray manjushaka flowers, scattering them over the Buddha, over the great assembly, and everywhere the Buddha world quaked and trembled in 6 different ways. At the time monks, nuns, laymen, lay women, devas, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kinnaras, mahoragas, human and non-human beings in the assembly, as well as the petty kings and will-turning sage. All those in the great assembly, having gained what they had never had before, were filled with joy, and with their palms pressed to gaze at with a single mind. Then the Buddha emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows. It illuminated all the 18,000 worlds in the eastern direction, down as far as Avicii, hell, and upward to the Akanchata heaven. From this world one could see living beings in the 6 paths of existence. In all of their lands one could likewise see the Buddhas present at the time in those other lands, and could hear the sutra teachings which those Buddhas were expound. At the same time one could see monks, nuns, laymen, and lay women who had carried out religious practices and attained the way. One could also see the Bodhis and Mahasattvas, who through various causes and conditions and various types of faith and understand, and in various forms and aspects, were carrying out the way of the Bodhisattva. And one could also see the Buddhas who had entered parinirvana, and also the Buddhas had entered parinirvana. Towers adorned with treasures were erected for the Buddha's relics. At the time Bodhisattva Maitreya had this thought: now the world-honored one has manifested these miraculous signs, but what is the cause of these auspicious signs? Now the world-honored one has entered into samadhi. An unfathomable event such as this is seldom to be met. Whom shall I question about this? Who can give me an answer? At the time Manjushri said to the Bodhisattva and Mahasattva Maitreya and the other great men, good men, I suppose that the Buddha, the world-honored one, wishes now to expound the great law, to rain down the rain of the great, to blow the horn of the great law, to beat the drum of the great law, to explain the meaning of the great. Good men in the past, I have seen this auspicious sign among the Buddhas. They emitted a beam of light like this, and after founded the great law. Therefore we should know that now when the present Buddha manifests this light, he will do likewise. He wishes to cause all living beings to hear and understand, which is difficult for all the world to believe. Therefore he has manifested this auspicious sign. Good men, once at a time, there immeasurable, boundless, inconceivable number of asamkhya kalpas. In the past there was a Buddha named Sun Moon Bright, thus come one worthy of offerings of bright and universal perfect clarity and conduct, well gone understanding the world on excel, worthy trainer of people, teacher of heavenly and human beings, Buddha, world honored one, who expounded the correct law. His exposition was good at the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end. The meaning was profound and far-reaching. The words were skillful and wondrous. It was pure and without out, complete, clean and spotless, and bore the marks of Brahma practice for the sake of those seeking. He responded by expounding the law of the Four Noble Truths so that they could birth, old age, sickness, and death, and attain nirvana for the sake of those seeking to become Prateka Buddhas. He responded by expounding the law of the 12-link cause of for the sake of the Bodhisattvas. He responded by expounding the 6 paramitas, causing them to gain anuttara samyak sambodhi and to acquire the wisdom that embraces all. Then there was another Buddha who was also named Sun Moon Bright, and then another Buddha also named Sun Moon Bright. There were 20,000 Buddhas, like all with the same appellation, all named Sun Moon Bright, and all had the same surname, the surname Bharadvaja Maitreya. You should understand from to the last, all had the same appellation, all were named Sun Moon Bright. They were worthy of all the 10 epithets, and the law they expounded was good at the beginning, in the middle, and at the last. Buddha, when he had not yet left family life, had 8 princely sons. The first was having intention, the second good intention, the third immeasurable intention, the fourth jeweled intention, the fifth increase intention, the sixth cleanse of doubt intention, the seventh echoing intention, and the 8th law intention. Dignity and virtue came easily, and each presided over a 4-continent realm. When these princes heard that their father had left family and had gained anuttara samyak sambodhi, they all cast aside their princely positions and followed him by leaving family, conceiving a desire for the great vehicle. They constantly carried out Brahma practices, and all of the law they had already planted good roots in the company of 1,000, 10,000 Buddhas. At the time the Buddha Sun Moon Bright preached the great vehicle sutra entitled Immeasurable Meanings, a law to instruct the Bodhisattvas, one that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddha. When he had finished preaching the sutra, he sat cross-legged in the midst of the great assembly and entered into the samadhi of the place of immeasurable meanings, his body and mind never moving. Dharava flowers, gray mandarava flowers, manjushaka flowers, and gray manjushaka flowers, scattering them over the Buddha and the great assembly, and everywhere the Buddha whirled great and trembled in 6 different ways. At the monks, lame women, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnaras, and mahuragas, the human and non-human beings in the assembly, as well as the petty kings and the wheel-turning sage kings. All those in this great assembly gained what they had never had before, and filled with joy pressed their palms together and gazed at the Buddha with a single mind. At the time the thus come one emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his, one of his characteristic features, lighting up 18,000 Buddha lands in the eastern direction. There was no place that the light did not penetrate, just as you have seen it light up lands now, Maitreya. You should understand this. At the time in the assembly, there were 20 million Bodhisattvas who were happy and eager to hear the law. When these Buddhas saw this beam of light that illuminated the Buddha lands everywhere, before they wished to know the causes and conditions that had occasioned this light. At the time there was a Bodhisattva named Wonderfully Bright who had 100 disciples. At this time the Buddha Sun Moon Bright arrived kalpas of the Bodhisattva, wonderfully bright, preached a great vehicle sutra called the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, law to instruct the Bodhisattva, one that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. For 60 small kalpas, the Buddha remained in his seat without rising, and the listeners in the assembly at the time also remained seated there for 60 small kalpas, their bodies and minds never moving, and yet it seemed to them that to the Buddha each were no more than the space of a meal. At this time in the assembly there was not a single person who in body or mind had the least feeling of weariness. When the Buddha, sun, moon, bright, had finished preaching the sutra over a period of 60 small kalpas, he spoke these words to the Brahmins, devils, shamanas, and Brahmins, as well as to the beings and asuras in the assembly, saying, tonight at midnight the thus come well will enter body nirvana, the nirvana of no remainder. At this time there was a bodhisattva named Virtue Storehouse, the Buddha, sun, moon, bright, bestowed a prophet himself, announcing to the monks, this bodhisattva Virtue Storehouse will be the next to become a Buddha. He will be called pure body Tathagata Adha Samyak Sambuddha. After the Buddha had finished bestowing this prophecy, at midnight he entered the nirvana of no remainder. After the Buddha had passed away, Bodhisattva wonderfully bright upheld the sutra of the Lotus of the Wonderful Law for a period of fully 80 small kalpas, expounding it for all. The 8 sons of the Buddha, sun, moon, bright, all acknowledge wonderfully bright as their teacher, wonderfully bright, burdened them and rousing them a firm determination to gain anuttara samyak sambodhi. Those princely sons gave offerings to immeasurable hundreds, thousands, and thousands, billions of Buddhas, and after that all were able to achieve the Buddha way. The last to become a Buddha was named Burning Torch. Among the disciples of wonderfully bright was one named Seeker of Fame. He was greedy for gain and support, and though he numerous sutras he could not understand them, but for the most part Seeker of Fame, because this man had an intention, planted various good roots. However, he was able to encounter immeasurable hundreds, thousands, and thousands, millions of Buddhas who make offerings to revere, honor, and praise the Maitreya. You should understand this bodhisattva wonderfully bright who lived, and could he be known to? He is no other than I myself, and bodhisattva Seeker of Fame was you. Now when I see this auspicious sign from when I saw before, therefore I suppose that now the thus come one is about to preach a great vehicle sutra called the Lotus of the Wonderful Law. Allah struck the bodhisattvas, and that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas. Let's go to tab 9, page 171. Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the discourse of Prajnaparamita, shed light on the 5 skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being, listened, Shariputra. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perception, mental formation, exists, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no touch, no taste, no mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment, because there is no attainment. The Bodhisattva, grounded in Prajnaparamita, find no obstacles for their minds, having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future arrive at Dhammapada Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore, one should know that understanding is the highest mantra, the unequaled mantra, the destroyer of ill-being, the incorruptible truth. The mantra of Prajnaparamita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate gate pada gate pada samgat bodhi swaha. Gate gate pada gate pada samgate bodhi swaha. Gate gate pada gate pada samgate bodhi swaha. Beings are limitless, I vow to liberate them. Afflictions are endless, I vow to eradicate them. Teachings are infinite, I vow to learn them. Buddhahood is supreme, I vow to attain. I vow that from now until the end of my life and in all future lives, until I attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, that I will help sentient beings in all realms of existence and their suffering. Namo thus come one worthy of offerings, a proper and universal, perfect in understanding and conduct, skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete understand of a worldly dharma, unsurpassed, night-taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored one. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasama Prapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasama Prapta Bodhisattva, Namo Mahasama Prapta Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Shittigarbha Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Manjushri Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Namo Samantabhadra. Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Maitreya Bodhisattva, Namo Great Pure Sea Light Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea Light Bodhisattvas, Namo Great Pure Sea Light Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas, Namo Deva Guarding Bodhisattvas. Take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world, dwelling in the refuge of Dharma. I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation, dwelling in the refuge of Sangha. Shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking refuge in the Dharma. In myself I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha. In myself I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities to embrace all beings and support transformation. Citing the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to benefits without limits. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Friendly reminder that we'll be celebrating Ulambana, our Parents' Day or Ancestors' Day, on September 7. It's going to be a Sunday. It'll be at 10 a.m. So it'll be in lieu of our normal service. We don't have 12:30 service that day. So I invite everyone to please join us on September 7th, 10 a.m. for Ulambana. Thank you. Namo Shakyamuni.